Thank you for choosing Tox News, your one and only source inside the Wolf of Wall Street. I am your host, the wacko weirdo rebel scum Jedi hero. And I applaud you for choosing Tox News. What's the thing going on today, huh? Well, it seems that short-selling stocks, GameStop, and Redditors seem to be popping right now. So we're gonna do a little bit of the right wing's perspective on what just happened with GameStop. So it's gonna be focused on that. If you're not interested in this, please step away. Please step back. We have 2 Daily Wire videos covering this. I kind of annoyingly buzzed around Ben Shapiro's Twitter yesterday to just kind of I don't know, cry for attention in his replies, but I ended up pointing out that Ben Shapiro was taking the time out of his day to undermine what actually happened with the Reddit investments and how it actually played out, because Ben Shapiro didn't like how the stock market and a hedge fund were getting undermined. So I decided, I'm gonna say something about it. And I guess I could show you the tweets that I had sent to him, and we can start there. But to add a cherry on top of the cake, I have a Dave Rubin on Glenn Beck's show video that I want to get into just because it really doesn't have too much. I mean, they're talking in generalities of like what's going on right now, but for the most part, still want to just dive into it a little bit, because Glenn Beck is like a fringe conspiracy theorist a bit, and Dave Rubin is just an empty shell for high-level ideas. So where did I get in on Ben Shapiro here? Let's go to my Twitter here. You can see it on YouTube, at ToxinPod, ToxnPod. Let's see here. Here was an interesting video that Glenn Beck did yesterday that I found interesting. Everybody kind of like always has this argument about, what the political ideology of Russia and China, because like whenever you have a communist conversation in the United States, everybody equates it to today's Russia or today's China, and sometimes even the early 1900s Stalin Russia or a Mao China. It's always compared there. But what I found interesting here is that Glenn Beck, a right-wing thought leader, did admit here reluctantly that these communist countries are operating under state capitalism. So I find that just pretty interesting, because like, how can you be communist? Like, of course they say Communist Party of China, so or the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, and then Russia also claims to be communist. But like, when you ask a leftist, they always go, well, that's not real communism, and it just kind of like muddies the political spectrum here in America and the understanding of politics here. Like, that's why we don't understand that there's not a real leftist party in the government. But, if you're getting authoritarianism out of your so-called communism, not quite really the ground definition of communism, especially when you haven't made it to a wageless, classless, stateless society. But I guess like them having that, we have to always say, well, Russia's communism, because no matter what, people are going to equate the communism to that nation, even though it's not necessarily what communism was intended for. So I just want to highlight here that Glenn Beck will constantly use how Russia and China are communist dystopias, and that's why we should avoid it at all costs. And but he plays the hand a little bit here, so let's get it.
Capitalism. Okay, this is from the World Economic Forum. Types of capitalism: state capitalism. That's where the government is the key stakeholder. Government steers the economy and can intervene where necessary.
It's China's model, right? Russia's model, in theory.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, state capitalism. Business interests are subsidiary to state interests. Okay, so if the state says we're going to do something, the businesses have to do it. That's state capitalism. Types of capital.
So just reluctantly going, yeah, no, that's what they are. But whenever the conversation comes up, they will use communism as a derogative term to talk about, well, look at how bad the freedoms are of people over here, when really they use communism merely as this like nomenclature just to put forward and say this is how benevolent we are, when in reality there is no dictatorship of the proletariat, there is no means of the production in the hands of workers. So we always have to say communist Russia, but what we really mean is state capitalists. So Ben Shapiro immediately yesterday morning had tweeted out a few tweets here, and I decided to come in and talk my shit. Nevertheless, Ben Shapiro said much of the enthusiasm from the GameStop prank, it's a prank, is rooted in a fundamental misconception that the stock market is merely a casino. This is untrue. And then he goes through on why we should take stocks and markets seriously. The GameStop guys believe the market is a casino, that stock traders are speculators who do not provide, and that purely gaming the system is how they make their money. If we all believe that, nobody should invest in the stock market, period. Unfortunately, that is like how hedge funds work. That's exactly how hedge funds work, is that they use speculation to move money around and to make profits. That's exactly how hedge funds work. It is actually illegal to engage in the pure pump and dump, in which you lie to fellow investors about undervalued stocks in order to make the profits when you drive up the price and sell. And that's what happened with the subprime loans and the CDOs during the housing crisis, is that the banks marked up the price for a lot of their subprime loan bonds. A lot of their mortgage bonds had completely shit loans in them, and they were defaulting, but they still upped the price and tried to sell them out before they finally did crash. So what the GameStop, Ben Shapiro continues here, what the GameStop guys are doing isn't illegal because they are not lying. They admit GameStop isn't worth much, except when they invested that much, it is actually worth that much. Ben's merely pointing out here that GameStop was on its way out, and there's really no reason for this investment other than to dunk on a bunch of hedge funds, which is true. But if the investors who their Reddit was taken down, so I'm not sure how far this is going, but as long as they hold the line, GameStop will actually be able to use that capital, hopefully for a second wind. I don't know what GameStop can do to innovate itself to continue competing with the Xbox Live store that's in everybody's Xboxes, Steam, the PlayStation Store, or even the myriad of streaming services that are coming out like Google Stadia. So I'm not sure like GameStop's going to be able to turn its trajectory around with this massive flux in investment, but it is a possibility that Ben Shapiro seems to be ignoring here. So what else does he say here? In other words, there is a reason hashtag eat the rich is trending. The motivating factor here isn't really hedge fund corruption. If you're worried about bailouts, as I am, you should be telling the government to stop bailing out financial firms. It's pure dislike for hedge fund guys. Kind of. That's not what, like, nobody's really accusing the hedge fund of like corruption, but there is kind of like an ethical question here of like when you bet against something to fail. That's what short betting necessarily is that you're hoping that the continued decline of the stocks that you have security bonds on keeps going down low, and then when it drops really low, you buy all those stocks and then sell them off. So you're basically making a profit off of the degradation of a business. So there's like an ethical question, because had the hedge fund met its goal on the expiration date of GameStop, people would have lost their jobs. And it's something that was brought up with the people who shorted the housing market, is that yes, they made billions of dollars from the stupidity and ignorance of the banking system, but they also were profiting at the time when mass evictions and savings accounts, 401ks were disappearing. Like a massive economic shift happened around the globe, and people in America who bet against the housing market ended up making a profit during that time. So while millions suffered, few made tons of money. And then the government also came in and bailed out all the banks, because they had to pay up all of those, those short end bets, while also losing all of the money from their terrible mortgage bonds. So he finishes off here. Some hedge fund guys are jackasses, some aren't, but undermining confidence in the pricing mechanism of the market to make some quick cash and screw those guys isn't virtue. Though again, it would take a heart of stone not to laugh. So, like, what honestly does he find that's funny here? If the screwing over the hedge funds, waiting for the failure of GameStop isn't a virtue. People who solely make money not even off of like anything productive other than moving money around through the stock market. So I'm not really sure what he's laughing at here. I don't, other than pandering to the populism of this certain story, because this is like small investors, average working Joes making a huge wave. So I feel like him just kind of like downplaying the actual momentum of this event, that it was a decentralized investment move, collective investment by internet people who they also call internet trolls to downplay them, and calling it pranks and screwing these guys and over virtue, but it's still laughable. Like, it's a play in populism because he doesn't want to sound like he's against small investors making big moves, making big money, but he also doesn't want them to sound like they did anything significant other than prank a hedge fund, because they don't want this kind of behavior repeating, especially since Acorn and Robinhood are incredibly accessible to small investors, small earners. So Shoe on Head even came in here and said prank, because like it's so obvious he's trying to undermine it. Before she had done that, I got my tweet out here that I can't find now. Let's see. Because I had made a point that he's trying to undermine the situation of what had actually gone on. So I'm just trying to get down to where that is. So, I simply responded, Ben doesn't like people who undermine hedge funds or the stock market, so he's going to undermine the people who collectively gamed both. Someone had responded, you need to read what he said again, because that's not the takeaway here. And this is my like fourth time reading it, and it is still my takeaway from that. I responded to him because when he said you need to read that again, I had two responses to him. One was before Ben finished his thread, which was like, well, what's your take? Because that's all I'm getting from this. Like, what is your takeaway? And I think he had responded that like he's just talking about he is talking about the system as a whole. Nothing he said was wrong. And I still don't agree to that. Because, Ben's not really stating any untruths here. He's just trying to downplay the situation. And I just simply responded, because once some hedge fund guys are jackasses, some aren't, but undermining confidence in the pricing mechanism of the market to make some quick cash and screw those guys isn't virtue. Though, again, it would take a heart of stone not to laugh. That's the perfect tweet of him downplaying the situation here. And so I simply said that's exactly what he's doing. He wants you to feel bad for hedge funds because something unexpected happened, and he doesn't want that unexpected to be taken seriously, or more people will do it. And I still feel that way. So we're going to get into first Michael Knowles, because his video is a little bit more narrative driven than Ben Shapiro's. Ben Shapiro actually does a breakdown of how stocks work. But we'll start with Michael Knowles. But first, I think the pod here should get a firm grasp of how an investor makes money from short selling. This comes from Investopedia. So I'm going to read a couple here just to get a quick overview so that we can continue on with the segments. So it says, one way to make money on stocks for which the price is falling is called short selling, or going short. Short selling is a fairly simple concept. An investor borrows a stock, sells the stock, and then buys the stock back to return it to the lender. Short sellers are betting that the stock they sell will drop in price. If the stock does drop after selling, the short seller buys it back at a lower price and returns it to the lender. The difference between the sell price and the buy price is the profit. So it's merely a mechanism to profit off of the decline of a stock. Short sellers are betting that a stock will drop in price. Short selling is riskier than going long on a stock because theoretically there is no limit to the amount you could lose. Speculators short sell to capitalize on a decline, while hedgers go short to protect gains or minimize losses. Short selling, when it is successful, can net the investor a nice profit in the short term, as stocks tend to lose value faster than they appreciate, which is not what happened in the GameStop situation. The value appreciated much higher when the expiration date was pending for the borrowed stocks that the investors or the hedge fund had. Those borrowed stocks that they sold rose in value. So when they were supposed to buy them back cheaper and give them back to the broker, the price was way too high, and they would have had to buy the stocks at that price, which was some screenshots showed 420.69. Not 100% sure where it's at right now. We can check really quick, though. The stock is GME. And this happened across the board with AMC, Nokia. It seems, I guess it's at 338 right now. The highest was about yesterday, 9:30 a.m. at 381. But then there's also been a lot of fuckery with Robinhood stopping the trade of GameStop, basically only allowing people who already had stock to sell it. So they weren't allowing anybody else to buy more stocks. And apparently this also has to deal with a bit of investment that Robinhood has through its parent company, who is also invested in Melvin Capital, who is the hedge fund that tried to short GameStop's stock. So for an example of short sale from Investopedia, if an investor thinks that Tesla stock is overvalued at $6.25 per share and is going to drop in price, the investor may borrow 10 shares of Tesla from their broker or bank, and this is what the hedge fund did. The hedge fund is the investor who borrowed 10 shares of Tesla from their broker, usually a bank, who then sells it for the current market price of $6.25. So they borrow 10 shares and they gain that money in the $6.25. If the stock goes down to 500, the investor could buy the 10 shares back at this price, return the shares to their broker, and net a profit of $1,250. However, if the Tesla price rises to $700, the investor would lose $750. So honestly, there is a quick way here for them to lose money. And that's exactly what happened for the hedge fund companies here. Or mostly just Melvin Capital, who I'm aware of. In the AMC and Nokia situations, those have different investors involved. But the idea is to borrow and not necessarily pay for those stocks at the price. You borrow those stocks, the broker then sells those stocks, and then once the price drops, you buy those stocks back and sell, and then give them back to the lender who lended you that original amount of stocks. It's not really even, I don't really like it, but it was something that was created around the time the housing market crashed. So let's get into Michael Knowles and what he thinks. The stock is it dropped about, it's, if you go on Google on your laptop or computer or whatever, the stock actually updates like while the stock exchange is open. It's pretty cool. So we can just keep it here while we do this.
This story about GameStop and the GameStop stock price going through the roof, this is the single funniest story that I have seen in years. And not only is it hilarious in and of itself, but it actually has deep political implications. And the political implications are simply delightful. I fear that because this involves finance and involves investing, this story might be a little too complicated for most people who aren't going to pay very close attention to it to understand just how funny it is. So I'll try to break it down very simply, because I don't know anything about finance either, but I've at least read a fair bit about this particular once in a century type of event, once in a lifetime type of event. A bunch of
What I'm really shocked here is that like he has to tell us what's funny about the situation. Um, so like again, like I think it's funny how right wingers just blatantly, rather than here to like report the news, are here to explain it. That's what like pundits, commentators, and thought leaders are in the public sphere to do. And here I am, here I am to respond to it.
Internet trolls on the Reddit board Wall Street Bets decided. Wall Street Bets, this is like an irreverent investing board. This is not like a sober, serious investing board. They just put up kind of crazy, risky bet ideas. They noticed that hedge funds had taken a short position on GameStop. GameStop is this video game store, right? You know what GameStop is. It doesn't have a ton of growth potential. It seems like it's kind of heading out the door, kind of like Blockbuster or some of these old companies. So these internet trolls discover that Wall Street took out.
What I find very funny is that he's like, you know what GameStop is. I don't have to explain GameStop. It's like, yeah, you don't. So use that time to explain what short selling is. Use your time to inform your viewers about the workings of economics. And then of course he like begins explaining this story by saying internet trolls, downplaying, even though there's not necessarily like a real organization we can put into this. If this had happened just without the internet, you wouldn't call them trolls, you would call them people.
Got a big short position on this, specifically one hedge fund called Melvin Capital. And
so like we're mainly going to be watching them seriously downplaying the collective investment of people that happened. And you know, a lot of things seem to be like a lot of events in the internet seem to be hitting a singularity, like monopoly, censorship, and now the power of the internet. And then on top of it, with Robinhood shutting down the purchasing of GameStop stocks, you're also seeing like market manipulation. There's class action lawsuits going out because of that. So the fascinating thing to me here is that there's like a singularity of events that are happening just because of the internet.
a short position is basically when you're betting against the stock. So if the stock price goes down, you make a lot of money. And if the stock price goes up, not only do you lose money, but you've got to start buying it up. So you've got to start putting more cash on the table to cover your losses, right? So GameStop, though, it was trading at like $6 not that long ago. It wasn't doing great. Hedge funds take out huge short positions on this. And these trolls at Wall Street Bets decide, we're going to make this stock price on this kind of crappy company go through the roof. And maybe we'll make some money in the process, but more importantly, we are just going to mess with these hedge funds. These guys, we have no sympathy for them. We're going to completely mess with the financial establishment. And the craziest thing is, it's working. The board has, I think, 2 million members. And so I was asking myself when this was going on, why hasn't this been done before? And the reason is you've never had this kind of the technology to do it, to wrangle like 2 million of these kind of eccentric type of people. But you've also never had the memes. You've never had the humor. You've never had the specific political conditions of people wanting to flip the bird to the establishment, which they believe has royally screwed them over in recent months. You've had...
this is just like, honestly, the evolving issue of Occupy Wall Street that happened like 2008. So I think it's ultimately like the evolution of that, people being sick and tired of Wall Street's greed and also thinking they're the only ones who are capable to participate in the market, specifically the stock market. So I just think that's interesting, and he's focusing in on how like humor was the necessity for all of this, that it just kind of roots everything into that prank and doesn't necessarily give it any kind of like I guess political validity. But even though like this is kind of moving along economic and political lines where like rich people are asking for regulations on all of this, when honestly their position was made public that they were going to short GameStop, and people took advantage of that. That's how the stock market
Individual
works.
aspects of that kind of thing, but you've never had it all coincide. This whole phenomenon is very internety. Okay, so it's very the kind of lingo that people use. They'll be joking about how, you know, they're just going to grit their teeth and take some of the losses until their mom brings them chicken tendies into the basement. You know, and they're using all this kind of.
See, yet again, he's downplaying the people who did this. He's building this image to them that like makes them look like just a bunch of homestead millennials. When sure, that could probably be obvious to most, right? Or not obvious to most. Jesus, that could be the case for some. Like, there's probably some kids who just made enough money to move out of mama's basement off of this stock investment. But to build that caricature as if that's everybody who's participating in it is downplaying the whole situation. And it's just making it look like the people who did this are the same people who flood K-pop memes when Nazis speak up. I think this is a growing situation here, and that's why they're allowed to play this like game of infantilizing, like downplaying the movement here. And it's fair just because there's not necessarily an organized movement to put a face on this, but I just want to keep highlighting here how much they're downplaying with their with the words that they're associating with the people who did this.
Very internety lingo. They have like sea shanties that are being posted. They posted one last night about how we've just got to hold on as the financial industry pushes back because we're all going to make a bunch of money and bankrupt Wall Street.
There once was a stock that put to sea. The name of the stock was GME. The price blew up and the shorts dipped down. Hold my bully boys, hold. Soon may the tendy man come to send a rocket into the sun. One day when the trading is done, we'll take our gains and go. She had not been 2 weeks from shore when Ryan Cohen joined the board. The captain called all hands and swore he'd take his shares and hold. Soon may the tendy man come to send a rocket into the sun.
Refers to
one day when the
chicken
trading
tenders.
is done, we'll take our gains and go.
It goes on. I encourage you to listen to the entire shanty. It goes on and on like this. So far, GameStop, not a great company, is up something like 2,500% this month. The stock has hit, I think, $460 a share. AMC Movies, this is another company that's basically headed for bankruptcy, right? Because no one's going to the movies anymore. AMC, they sent this one through the roof. They sent BlackBerry up, the old cell phone company. That's up 250%. I think they were going to target Nokia as well, another cell phone company that nobody uses anymore. It's all just a huge meme.
It could be, but what I'm very interested in seeing is that, like, if the companies are able to utilize these massive investments and actually return those investments to their investors, maybe, but it like either way, somebody is going to end up profiting off the short-term success and then failure of these companies, and the people who bought all these stocks are eventually going to sell them at a pretty high price and make money, and then the hedge funds will come back in like the vultures that they are and eat the corpse once the stock fails again, if it does. But we have to eventually see the outcome of what these investments are going to do if AMC is able to utilize this capital into actually building a better business model post-pandemic, maybe. But it could all just be for the memes, but in the long run, it shows that people who use Robinhood, Acorn, and small investors can have a pretty large impact when they coordinate.
However, the meme is becoming reality. So the internet joke is totally affecting reality, and it's going to put hedge funds out of business.
There was like this article that had come out just after the situation, and it says how the meme stocks have risen. And then my friend just sent me an article talking about how Elon Musk and Reddit is basically affecting the stock market with every post. It's very interesting stuff going on right now and how much effect the internet's actually having.
Gabe Plotkin, who's the hedge fund trader at Melvin Capital, He was the one with the biggest short position. Yesterday, when this news broke, he had to raise almost $3 billion to bail out the fund. Squawk Box, which is, the very serious sort of CNBC financial news show, they just couldn't make any sense of it.
We've mentioned social media. I couldn't help but it's not obviously similar to some of this controversy surrounding Facebook and Twitter and everything else. But once again, what's one of the things that we're talking about is maybe misinformation and pump and dumps, and it's occurring on social media again. I'm wondering whether it's part of the same problem, the type of regulation that.
What I find very fascinating here is how he is close to the mark of making a point, but also just throws out words that are supposed to make the point, but he honestly doesn't seem to know what he's talking about. And that's going to be the problem for the boomers. And as the internet continues to take further control of our society and organizing our politics and our economics at this point. And it's fantastic that watching somebody be aged out of culture is pretty interesting.
That we finally need to consider. And like I said, we should always have a light touch with regulation, but you're seeing the way things can get started. Again, this is different. Maybe it's Reddit, maybe it's not Facebook, but you're seeing the same situation. At this point, it's not about an election. It's not about an insurrection, but there are interesting things happening that seem to be spawned to some extent, or at least blown out of proportion by social media again.
That entire monologue was completely meaningless. That guy has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. First of all, some of the things he's saying are just factually not true. He's saying this might be a pump and dump. It's not a pump and dump. A pump and dump is where you pick a stock cynically, you bring up the price really, really high, and then you try to find a bigger idiot to sell it to. So you're going to totally mess that guy over, but you're going to make money at his expense. That's not what's going on here. What's going on here is these internet trolls found a giant short position from a giant institutional investor, and they said, nah, I don't think so. We're not going to let you guys do that. And so then this financial analyst on CNBC says, well, I don't know, maybe it's, maybe we need to regulate this. I mean, we want a light touch on regulation, but we can't let these guys do it. What he's really saying is, we don't want any regulation for the institutional investors. We don't want any regulation for Wall Street when they do this exact thing. But we do want regulation for ordinary people. We can't let individual investors do this kind of thing, then the whole game's going to be out. What is going on here is not...
That last minute is probably the only thing that I agree with Michael Knowles on this segment, but he keeps saying internet trolls to specifically downplay the exercise of people's investments. We don't speak about this way about anybody if they put this act outside of an internet forum.
Primarily a financial phenomenon. It's a political phenomenon. And it is the same phenomenon that you've been seeing build up, coinciding, in part caused by, in part causing the Trump phenomenon. It's ordinary.
Now, this connection of the dot I don't like, because it's merely just trying to get people to oh, man, I should have been on the Trump train this whole time because it's so anti-establishment. Trump's not anti-establishment. Never has been.
People rebelling against.
He merely used populism in the same way that Russia uses communism to show his some sort of benevolence to the worker man. No.
An established elite that they don't have any faith in. A lot of times this word populism gets thrown around, and I think it's often sort of a silly word because I don't think people are either populists or elitists. For instance, if we have a good elite,
most voters aren't going to be populists because they're already in their own self-interest. Populists are for politicians and people who have public appearances to use so that they can use that nomenclature to say, I am here for the people. And that's why the Fox News will put that nomenclature on Trump, or other news outlets will use that on Bernie Sanders, is because they have their fingers on the pulse of society. But it's not really a name for voters to use because you are the populace. You're the population. That's wouldn't make sense. It's somebody who says I represent the people over the elites. So it wouldn't make sense for you to be a populist. No, that wouldn't make very much sense unless you were running for office.
Then I'm an elitist. If we can have a good, virtuous, smart, thoughtful elite, then great, works for me. Count me in the elitism category. But we don't have that. We have a bunch.
That doesn't make sense either. Why would you have a benevolent elitist? If you put those two terms together, they're probably showing most of their benevolence towards the elite. They're working in their class interests. They're working for the class that they represent or that they come from. So how can you have a populist elite? That makes no sense. It's contradictory. It's a contradictory statement to the definition of populism.
Bunch of corrupt, cynical idiots in our so-called elite. And so with that kind of an elite, I'm the opposite of an elitist. I'm the furthest thing I'm a total populist. If the elites that we are currently governed by are hipster Rasputin Jack Dorsey, a grown man with a nose ring, and the crooks of the Obama-Biden liberal dominant regime,
but only if those are the specific elites, all right? Not Steve Bannon, not the banking industry. It's specifically just those ones that we're constantly demonizing, such as the Democratic Party and big tech right now. So that's a very interesting point to make. Those are the elites, and so I must be populist. Even though populism extends, like, the elites extend beyond your political enemies. He's just like Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson. He's funded by billionaires to defend their private property through political propaganda. What are we doing here?
Establishment, which is utterly upending liberal education. If those are the elites, I'm out, right? And that's what you're seeing here. And you're seeing all these unwashed peasants on these internet boards eating their chicken tendies. You're seeing them outfox
the elites that the Wall Street bets, if they're actually moving against them, because it's hard since it's a decentralized movement. Everybody's doing it for their own interests. But the thing about hedge fund companies is that they're literally there only to generate profit. They actually produce nothing other than trading stocks. So, like, that is the elite that they're fighting against, which for some reason you failed to bring up. Why? There's a very specific group of elites here that are being focused on, and it's hedge fund companies and big banks. Wall Street is the elite, not Democrats, not Republicans, not big tech, who obviously participates in the stock market, but Tesla or Elon Musk is having a grand time in the middle of all of this. It's specifically hedge fund companies and banks who use the stock market to generate profit without it having to produce anything but the actual movement of money.
The Wall Street elite. And they are not liking that very much. So now the financial establishment is pushing back. They're trying to shut these guys down. In a way, the media understands this thing. So Chris Cillizza at CNN posted this piece yesterday that people made fun of, but he actually had sort of a point. He said how Trumpism explains the GameStop stock surge. And it is kind of a negative article, but if you take the preference out of it and you just look at the phenomenon, yes, it does sort of explain that. But then other media outlets do the same thing they do to all the Trump people. They say, well, the only way to explain what's going on right now is to say that the people doing this have awful, terrible intentions, and they're evil, and they're bigoted, and they're neo-Nazis, and they're white supremacists, and we got to shut the whole thing down. The elites are making the exact same mistake with regard to this kind of frivolous financial.
I did see one article whose headline had said that this was like a grander problem of white supremacy, and no, I don't even agree with that sentiment that's coming from liberal news media. But on top of this, the fact that he's bringing it up is just to do the same thing over and over again, build that victimhood oppression and the fake idea that the state is coming for white supremacists who they think is everybody that supports Trump. It's amazing that he was able to fit it into this segment, but I hate that the certain liberal news or liberals just keep giving them that ammo, because it's just them missing the mark as well.
Phenomenon that they have for the political phenomenon. And just like Trumpism, it isn't going anywhere. This is only more evidence that, sure, you can vanquish Trump for now, but you're not getting rid of the forces that propelled Trump and that have supported him.
These are not the forces that propelled Trump. Like, this is completely separate from Trump. The thing is, though, is that as income inequality keeps rising, banks keep profiting. Even during a pandemic, the stock market rises to unbelievable levels, and austerity measures from neoliberalist policies keep extending forward. That's going to lead to another Trump. So this idea of people fighting back against hedge fund companies and Wall Street being a part of Trump's movement, asinine. And it's only him drawing that through line specifically for conservatives and those disaffected enough to actually believe that Trump had their best interests in mind ever. He never did. He was always in it for himself. So
Mother Jones, the liberal outlet, I guess even further leftist outlet, is looking at the GameStop Wall Street bets phenomenon and following up on what the CNN types are saying this isn't just Trumpism. This is neo-Nazism. This is white supremacy. One reporter from Mother Jones says, I can report from the Telegram channels that the Nazis appear to be trading GameStop and AMC as well. Now, why would someone say that?
I like some of Mother Jones' reporting, but they have missed the mark as well several times. Of course, there's going to be a diverse group of people participating in this action, and I'm not going to say that necessarily like neo-Nazis or white supremacists aren't anti-establishment because they are fervently against neoliberalism. But their ultimate goal doesn't involve the dismantling of institutions, but the redirection in ensuring a ultra-nationalist, American exceptionalist, traditionalist, kind of political organizing and cultural change. So they're not that anti-establishment as far as it goes to like the foundations and institutions of this country. Like most of the libertarians don't want to get rid of the stock market. They merely want to remove government regulation or even government interference with the stock market. So in a way that's anti-establishment, but not quite, not wholly anti-establishment. I don't know why Mother Jones really felt the need to report on the fact that neo-Nazis were also trading in this stock. I'm not 100% sure.
Why would someone say, how do you know that's the Nazis trading this?
When you go to Telegram, you can know. You will know for sure. Telegram, oh yeah, you will know for sure by their speech.
I mean, to Mother Jones, everyone to the right of Hillary Clinton is a Nazi.
See, that's what I'm saying. He made that through line there. They give them this ammo, and then they use it to make everybody feel victimized by a caricature or a stereotype that they aren't necessarily just because they're conservatives. Even though conservatives tend to bump shoulders with white supremacists, though. That's the thing to mark here. And that's the unfortunate thing, that everybody who was totally against or totally for gaming this hedge fund company and also just dunking on Wall Street, like they're going to bump shoulders with people who don't necessarily ideologically agree with them. But he's using this yet again to be like, all Trump supporters are being painted as white supremacists by the left, and this isn't true, and how can they hate us so much? And it's just, I hate that the liberal media is constantly feeding them this ammo when it's totally unnecessary at a time when like white supremacy doesn't necessarily need to be part of the conversation.
I think the reason to say that is because it justifies shutting it all down. If it's ordinary internet trolls eating chicken tenders, you don't have a good argument to shut down trading on this stock, because ordinary people are doing what institutional investors have done for a long time. But if it's Nazis, you can do whatever you want. A reporter for The Hill, a much more mainstream outlet, writes to the reporter from Mother Jones, what is your sense of the overlap between the Wall Street bets people and the Nazis on Telegram and elsewhere who stormed the Capitol? Ooh, good. Maybe we can use the FBI to go to their homes and shut them down and put them in prison and take away all their money. They can't do this, darn it. Discord, a social media platform, shut down the Wall Street Bets account for hate speech. Because they drove...
The Reddit subreddit was shut down by Reddit as well.
GameStop and AMC and BlackBerry, because they drove them through the roof to wreck some Wall Street investors for the lulz, for the laughs. They booted them for hate speech. This is the same thing you see done to conservatives whenever they walk a little bit away from the liberal establishment, whenever they question in any way the dominant liberal regime. what are we told? We're told that's hate speech, that's bigotry, it's dangerous, it's a threat. You're a Nazi, you're a white supremacist, and we've got to censor you. NASDAQ is considering halting trading to let the investors, quote, recalibrate. NASDAQ CEO Adina Friedman said that the exchange could halt trading activity for stocks in the event that they were targeted by these internet users.
So this isn't necessarily the same situation that's going on with like big tech and censorship of misinformation, which everybody on the right wing keeps saying that it's just the silence of conservatives, but it's misinformation specifically, or even hate speech, because yet again, like I said, conservatives bump shoulders with white supremacists and other bigots. The thing is, though, that like this concerted effort that comes from different sections of our basically establishment, or the powers that be, are going to continue to try and regulate, or even not just downplay, but kind of harm the movements that hurt the status quo or the establishment. So this isn't necessarily like, it's not okay. And I think the class action lawsuits should go through, and we should definitely make sure that the stock market isn't being manipulated to harm the small investors that did this. Or bail out the company whose short selling actually backfired on them. We shouldn't bail them out either. But like, it's just obvious that the powers that be don't want to play a game where average people can succeed extraordinarily well. They want to keep playing the rigged game where their country clubs are closed off. So, yeah.
So you're going to let these giant bigwigs on Wall Street have a completely unfair advantage on investing when their investments get threatened. But ordinary people, what happens when you're with far less knowledge, by the way? What happens when you lose some money in the markets? Do they stop trading on NASDAQ for you? I don't think so. The White House, for their measure, are monitoring the situation. Jen Psaki, the press secretary, was asked about this, and she had a typically profound answer.
Is the White House concerned about the stock market activity we're seeing around GameStop, and now with some other stocks as well, including the subsidiary or whatever, the company that was Blockbuster? And have there been any conversations with the SEC about how to proceed?
Well, I'm also happy to repeat that we have the first female Treasury Secretary and a team that's surrounding her, and often questions about market we'll send to them.
Hold on.
That was a terrible response. Oh, man. I hate when me and the right kind of feel the same, but then we have different outcomes. But that was a terrible response.
What? Hey, this is the strangest day in the markets that we've had in 100 years. What's going on?
I could say 100 years, but honestly, it's more like 13.
Over there. Well, I'd like to remind you that the Treasury Secretary has breasts.
I don't know why he had to reshape the narrative like that when it was ridiculous without really exaggerating it that far. Like, I don't know why we had to add like a tinge of misogyny into it. Like, I get, like, maybe it's a little bit misogynistic to be like, well, we have our first woman there. But, like, why do you have to highlight the fact that, like, the most, like, expressive thing about women to show how ridiculous that statement was without... Like, it was already ridiculous. Why, Michael?
Okay. Can you tell us anything about the markets? She identifies as a woman, and her pronouns are she and her. Yes, Jen Psaki, I understand all that, but I need things that matter. I need information. I need information that matters, not just your ridiculous liberal identity politics claptrap. I hope you enjoyed that.
I don't like the way he ended up going about that at the end. Like, I get that was a poorly swerved question, but like really going in on identity politics at the end there, just because like, oh, you liberals and your identity politics all the time. It's just, ugh, makes me feel gross. All right, Benny, it's your turn. Daily Wire continues.
Alrighty, so today I'm going to...
I have watched this before, and there's two, not one, but two ads for ExpressVPN in this, and so I'm going to have to fast forward, which is good that I viewed this beforehand because I would have seen those unexpectedly, but two. He put two in a 9-minute segment.
To explain what just happened with GameStop. To put it mildly, it's been a wild ride for GameStop, which at one point here has been valued at more than Delta Airlines, which is very weird because GameStop, for people who have visited it, is basically a swap meet meets Blockbuster for video games. Basically, here's what happened. So at the beginning of January, they had a change in leadership, and that caused some optimism at the company. But some people thought that the optimism was sort of overvalued at the company in hedge fund world. So what happened is all of those hedge fund traders, they short sold the stock. So I'm going to explain what exactly happened and then how a bunch of people on Reddit basically screwed all of those hedge fund guys. It's pretty unbelievable. We'll get to that in just 1 second. First, I want to remind you, you need
and
to
then there's the VPN app. Just before we get into what he said, I did find it interesting that this broke on Wall Street Bets about 2 hours ago. SEC reviewing recent trading validity amid GameStop frenzy, vows to protect retail investors. Those retail investors are the Redditors or the small investors, so I find that very interesting. I wonder how maybe that could be used in the right-wing narratives to protect business interests, but so far, we're not seeing that wholeheartedly. They're going on the side of this is a funny prank and we like what's going on. But it shouldn't be taken seriously. Seriously, though. Shouldn't take it seriously. And I found this video pretty interesting. It comes from a very wealthy person. Here we go.
The reason the market is doing what it's doing is people are sitting at home getting the checks from the government, okay? And this fair share is a bullshit concept. It's just a way of attacking wealthy people, and, you know, I think it's inappropriate. We all got to work together and pull together. The reason...
Oh, man, the stock market soared during the pandemic when average Americans got $1,200, and he's so pissed about it. I don't remember. I don't see his name. But he's obviously some kind of wealthy investor. His name isn't just highlighted here, but that's so funny. The first comment is, "Can we make this man poor somehow?" That comes from the Needle Drop. He reviews music on YouTube. That's pretty funny. People for Bernie said Bernie 2020 literally released a video that put the words "sad billionaire" over Leon Cooperman, who I guess that's who that is. Let's check out that. Yeah. So apparently he complains a lot when his financial interests are, I guess, being attacked. That's funny. That's really funny. All right, so now we got to fast forward past Benny's ExpressVPN bullshit. 2 ads in 1 segment, man. Like, come on. 2 ads, 1 segment. Like, don't. Do 1. Let's see.
is. So we have a couple of players in our short sale. Okay, if you believe a value is overpriced for a stock, if you think that a stock is overpriced, then you engage in what's called a short sale so you can capture the value of the overpricing. Here's how it works. You have a hedge fund guy. We're gonna call that guy Bruce because everybody hates Bruce.
I guess in a way you could say that short selling starts when they are overpricing their stock, but normally you just do it if a stock is going to drop. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be like overpriced. That would mean that GameStop was committing fraud. It's simply when the stock price is going to fail. It's going to fall. And so then they can sweep up those really cheap stocks. So overpricing, not 100%.
Bruce, right? So here's Bruce. Okay, so you got Bruce. Over a 1 month period, Bruce believes that the stock of GameStop is going to drop. Right? This is 1 month. Okay. So what does Bruce do? He doesn't own any stock in GameStop because he doesn't like GameStop. He thinks that it's actually not a company that is of great value. So what does Bruce do? He goes to a broker, right? The broker then proceeds to lend Bruce the stock. Okay? The stock. is moving from the broker to Bruce. Bruce is going to borrow that stock for a month. Then, 1 month from now, Bruce is going to give that stock back to the broker plus some sort of percentage fee. So let's just say that Bruce is going to give for the sake of easy math, the broker back the stock plus $10. So Bruce, in 1 month, is then going to reverse the transaction. He is going to return the stock to the broker plus $10. Okay, now, Bruce, again, he thinks that the stock is overpriced right now.
And if you're paying attention to this, essentially the broker loses nothing, because either way, they're going to make money off of either the investor succeeding and making profits and paying those fees, or they're also going to make their money back if the stock continues to rise, and that money that or the stocks that they borrowed, they have to pay back at a higher value. So either way, the broker is going to be fine.
So now Bruce has the stock. So what does Bruce do? Let's say that the stock price is $50 for the sake of argument. So Bruce then goes to the market and he is going to sell this stock, right? He's going to sell the stock that he has borrowed to the market. Okay, and Bruce, in return, is going to receive, Bruce now has $50 in his pocket. Now, the month progresses. Bruce has no stock, but he has to return the stock back to the broker. So what does he do? He waits for a month. Now, because Bruce was right, the stock price dropped. So Bruce can now buy the stock from the market, right? So the market is now going to sell the stock to Bruce. And Bruce, let's say it's dropped to $20, is going to pay $20 to the market. So that means that Bruce sold the stock at 50. He bought the stock at 20. So that means that he made $30 on that transaction. Then he has to return the stock plus $10 to the broker. So now he has made $20 on the transaction, right? So here's what everybody at the end of the day got from that transaction. So the broker got the stock plus $10, and Bruce ends up clearing a profit of $20 after all that is said and done. Okay, that's what Bruce is hoping for if the value of the stock has dropped. Now, here's what the GameStop guys did. Alrighty, so before we get to more of this...
Oh, God. There it is. The second VPN advertisement in the middle of explaining how the stock market works. You got it? You understand now? Okay, now, to talk about VPN. Like, come on, man. That's not how you teach a class. Could you imagine if your teacher, like, stopped to be like, all right, now about PowerPoint. And it's just like, how am I going to retain all this information?
VPN.com.
Ah!
There's a Reddit thread called Wall Street Bets. And they noticed that there were a lot of Bruces, and all the Bruces were short selling the stock. All the Bruces were basically betting.
All these Bruces were collectively in one segment, though. We need to highlight that, is that it was mostly Melvin Capital, a hedge fund company that pulls together rich people's money to invest or, I guess, even short sell.
That they were going to be paying back the broker the stock right now, but they don't actually have the stock, right? They haven't actually bought the stock yet, right? They're planning on buying the stock right before they sell it back to the broker.
Sold it.
So they don't have the stock. So what do the subreddit guys do? What the subreddit guys do is they say, okay, what if we just Bruce? What if what we actually do here is drive up the price of the stock, right? So now when Bruce, let's say he sells it for $50 because he thinks it's going to be down at 20 a month from now. Now the month has passed. Right, we're now in this period. So the Reddit guys, what do? They say, we are going to artificially boost the price of the stock because all of us are going to get together. We're going to buy up all the stock that exists in GameStop. We're going to buy like all of it. And so the price is not going to be $20 for Bruce to actually buy the stock so that he can pay back the broker. Instead, the stock is going to be $200. Right, so now Bruce is really screwed because Bruce sold the stock for $50, but now he has to buy the stock for $200. So that means that Bruce is no longer up $20. Now, Bruce is down $160. Right? So that is what they are doing, in short. They're basically screwing Bruce beyond belief by artificially boosting the price of the stock. Now, here's the thing. They're not taking into account the market fundamentals. They don't care about the market fundamentals. They don't care that GameStop actually is not worth $200 in terms of the stock. So what does that mean? This means that this...
But it is. It's not an artificial investment when everybody pulls their money in to increase the value of the stock. It's not a pump and dump. Come on. Again, like downplaying it by saying they're ignoring market fundamentals when it's exactly part of market fundamentals. That it didn't do what Bruce anticipated, and rather it did the opposite, and now Bruce still has to play within the lines of the game as the investors of GameStop did. And GameStop hopefully feels the responsibility to return that investment rather than wasting it and that money just then becoming sold, and then GameStop goes out of business, and then we repeat the cycle again of hedge fund companies short selling it as soon as it starts dropping really hard and making a ton of money.
It only works, and this can only continue so long as the price of the stock remains high. Because once the price of the stock begins to drop, if he continues to buy short sales, then as the price of the stock drops, you go back to your original calculation, right? If the price of the stock goes back down to $20, then Bruce is okay. He can still buy all of the stock back. So they can keep screwing Bruce for as long as possible just by holding the stock. And that's why you're seeing things like hold the line, do not sell, trending on Twitter. Because all these Reddit guys are like, the longer we do this, the more the hedge fund guys get screwed. Because what the hedge fund guys are doing in order to combat the fact that they're losing money on each one of these deals is, number one, they have to buy the stock in order to pay back the broker, or at least they have to pay the broker some money. And two, they realize that at a certain point, this is going to give way. Because all the people who bought, all the Reddit guys who bought, eventually they're going to realize, hold up a second, I can make a lot of money by selling the stock right now, right? That will drop the stock price eventually, but I will clear this giant profit in the meantime. So what the big hedge fund guys are doing is they are betting even more into short, right? They're saying, okay, for sure the stock is going to drop. We know it's going to drop. It's just a matter of time for it to drop. So what they are actually doing is creating more of an impetus for people to continue buying the stock and setting the stock price higher, because the more that they short squeeze, it's called the short squeeze, the more that they short squeeze the brokers, the more that the brokers are going to have to pay in order to fulfill the promises that they have made to the brokers in the first place. The more Bruces they screw, the more money they can make. But that only holds true so long as you can hold the line, so long as there's a collective action not to just sell right now and drop the price of the stock. So that is what is going on right now. Now, in the midst of all of this, a bunch of tech companies have decided they don't like what the Reddit guys are doing. They don't like that the Reddit guys are screwing the Bruce guys. And there are a couple reasons they're saying this. One is they're saying that the Reddit guys, they don't care about the underlying value of the stock. They don't care about the fact that they are now trading the stock in multiple times what it actually is probably worth. What they really care about is screwing the Bruces of the world, and this is screwing up the market mechanism. So that's kind of that's a somewhat fair criticism. The other thing...
Not really, because again, if GameStop is able to utilize its position, they can actually return the investment as the stock market works. So it, like, Ben's argument plays on the case that GameStop's going to do absolutely nothing with the investments in huge spike in capital that it now has. But just want to highlight this story here because it's not necessarily a fair criticism to shut them out just because they're a bunch of trolls, and so the market can go back to balance and GameStop can go out of business. CNN Business reports a Robinhood customer filed a class action lawsuit against the stock trading company app Thursday after the company barred traders from buying shares of GameStop promoted by Wall Street Bets, a popular Reddit group for investors. The lawsuit, filed in the Southern District of New York, claims that Robinhood's actions rigged the market against its customers. Quote, Robinhood's actions were done purposefully and knowingly to manipulate the market for the benefit of people and financial institutes who were not Robinhood's customers, the lawsuit states. Robinhood did not respond to a request for a comment. I want to know whether or not they highlighted Robinhood's possible conflict of interest. There's a new subreddit called Class Action Robinhood. I'm trying to find the specific issue Robinhood has, because it has connections to Melvin Capital, and I'm trying to find the article that draws that through line. And I spelled connection wrong. That's funny. Financial ties between Robinhood and funds shorting GME fall under scrutiny. This is from Cointelegraph.com. Let's see. However, let's see. Citadel and Point72 Asset Management came to the investment firm's rescue on Monday, investing $2.75 billion in Melvin and patching the problem while the firm seemingly looked for more lasting solutions. Within a few days, Robinhood would go on to restrict trading for GME and others, effectively preventing retail investors from purchasing more shares of the stocks. While still far higher than it was earlier this month, the price of GME has halved today, dropping from 462.42 to 231.57 at the time of this publication. At the time of this recording, it's at 357. According to a June report from the Financial Times, $39 million of Robinhood's revenues from equities and options order flow came from Citadel Securities, a market maker sister firm of Citadel. At the time, this represented more than 35% of the trading platform's revenues. Holy crap. The same people that bailed out Melvin Capital and helped them cover their losses. Because if the price continued to rise, they would have had to pay more. They still would have had to pay more until they closed their position, and they did close their position already. In summary, Citadel is one of Robinhood's biggest customers. Citadel invested in Melvin, which is potentially facing trouble because a bunch of investors from Reddit decided they didn't like a major hedge telling the market to crush GameStop. Many of the Redditors used Robinhood to buy GameStop shares. Now Robinhood has severely restricted trading for GameStop. So that I find interesting isn't really reported through right-wing media, nor is it on mainstream, I guess, liberal media. But what do they call it? I can't remember. It's like, it's not legendary. It's something else. I can't remember it. Shoot.
They don't like is they don't like the people getting screwed. They don't like that it's the hedge fund guys that they normally trade with who are getting screwed. So what you have seen is places like Robinhood say, we're not going to allow you to continue to buy up the stock and continue to artificially inflate.
See, and by simply saying that Robinhood just doesn't like this people power, ignores the possible financial ties that, like, the broader picture here that's going on, that Citadel is a customer of Robinhood and Citadel is well invested in Melvin Capital, who is the central hedge fund to the short selling of GameStop. So by ignoring that, I feel like it doesn't really grant the broader picture to everybody.
Inflate the price of the stock, right? You're seeing other places take down subreddit boards, right? The subreddit board was actually taken down. The folks who did that said, oh, it was to ban hate speech. It was not to ban hate speech. It was not to ban violent speech. It was specifically done in order to undercut the market for GameStop stock. It was deliberately done in order to create a sellable market. So people would start selling their stock immediately and the price would go back down and people would stop getting screwed over in Bruce world. Okay, so that's exactly what's going on with GameStop right now. You can be on either side of that. You can be on neither side of that. You have to admit that this is legitimately one of the funniest things that has ever happened in the history of Wall Street.
He focuses in on how funny it is, but I think it's pretty momentous, especially when you realize how close Citadel, Melvin, and Robinhood are. It's kind of like the market kind of showing its face there, that when there's ties to stock market, they will collaborate together to shut down their the antithesis to their interests. So keep paying attention to the financial ties between Robinhood and the hedge fund Melvin Capital, because it's important. And that's going to be it for this segment. We will be back with how Dave Rubin is shocked at how fast our world is changing. Oh boy. Oh man. But yeah, that's the general overview of how the right is talking about this situation, and it's mostly to undermine the actual potential power of the movement. Just because it's decentralized and they can make it look like a bunch of millennial ramen eating, hot pocket consuming, chicken tendy internet trolls. Which some of that is true, but also you have to acknowledge the fact that this made a huge wave in the stock market and really changed people's perspective on the stock market and how to operate in a post hedge fund world. But we'll be back shortly with more Tox News.